We're going to do an overview of the Roaring 20's. So the Roaring 20's was a time of great change, and one of the ways America changed was that the automobile became more available, cheaper. So how did that happen? Well, people like Henry Ford used the assembly line to mass produce affordable cars. So as you can see here on this picture on the left, you'd have people in a line, each doing a very simple job that eventually would lead to the creation of a very complicated thing like a car. And this made, if you can make it easier and faster, then the price of it will go down. It's cheaper, more people can buy it.
So, affordable cars led to greater mobility for Americans, which meant they could move around easier. More jobs were created because people needed to fix cars, such as auto mechanics. People needed to work at gas stations. The growth of the transportation industry, and more people started moving to the suburbs.
Another technology that changed life greatly in America during the 20's was the radio. Increased ways to communicate in the 20's. So now you can communicate across the country. Also, more people own telephones, so they can communicate with people far away from them. The radio led to the broadcast industry, so you had shows and programs and things created to entertain people in their homes. And also, people often went to see the movies. The movies have been around for a while, but in the 20's, people went to see them almost every week. And in the theater, they could see ways of life that they wanted to copy, and that led to growth in other industries. You had all of a sudden celebrities in the 20's. You had very famous people who were doing movies. So you had Charlie Chaplin, famous comedy star. You had Mary Pickford. Her nickname was America's Sweetheart, one of the biggest movie stars of the early movie era. You had action stars like Errol Flynn. And the fact that across the country people could see fashions, or they could see people they really liked and they wanted to copy their fashion or the way they looked, led to a national style. So you didn't have people in San Francisco or New York dressing differently. Now they sort of dress the same because they all saw the same movies. So people, when actresses like Louise Brooks looked a certain way and people wanted to copy her style, her short hair, the bangs, the bob, and the short dresses, which we call the flapper style, you saw girls across the country copying the style that they saw in the movies.
So, electricity also had a significant impact on Americans because it allowed Americans to buy labor-saving devices that used electricity, such as vacuum cleaners, washing machines, and devices like that. Lighting was made available for homes and businesses. Entertainment was able to be powered, so the radio was powered, movie theaters used power, and also communication devices used electricity.
One of the interesting things about the 20's is that in the midst of all this change and excitement people felt, that alcohol was actually illegal during this time. So for some people, the way they like to relax and enjoy themselves and have a good time was now illegal. So the 18th Amendment prohibited the manufacture, sale, and distribution of alcohol. But even though alcohol was illegal, that didn't mean people didn't want to drink it anymore. So criminals started taking up the sale and manufacture and distribution of alcohol. So you had these people called bootleggers. They would illegally transport and sold alcohol at secret bars called speakeasies. So the saloon had to go in hiding now. Now, because of alcohol becoming illegal and because so many people still wanted to drink it and criminals would sell it to them, crime went up, and this became a very big problem. There was high crime in the 20's, and usually connected to alcohol. And so eventually, after the 20's ended, the 18th Amendment is repealed, taken away by the 21st Amendment. So alcohol is once again legal. Just a picture here. During the past, when the 18th Amendment was passed, you would see towns gathering all the alcohol and smashing it and dumping it into lakes and destroying it. But this did not stop people from either making their own alcohol or trying to get it from Canada, sneaking it through the Canadian border or things like that, and going partying at speakeasies, having drinks at these illegal bars that were hidden away.
So the art started to develop. as artists like Georgia O'Keeffe began painting famous scenes of cities and the urban Southwest.
So here's a picture of one of George O'Keeffe's 20's paintings, showing the city life in America. And then as she moved out to the Southwest later on in her life, she painted American scenes and became most famous for her paintings of large-scale paintings of flowers.
Another famous artist was F. Scott Fitzgerald, who wrote the famous book The Great Gatsby, which was recently turned into a Hollywood movie. Aaron Copland and George Gershwin were American composers that created classical music that had American tones.
Artists have, art grew in the 1920s in all aspects of society. So there was also a movement called the Great Migration. Many African Americans left the South to find work in the North and Midwest. This was called the Great Migration. Okay, a later artist called Jacob Lawrence documented the Great Migration in his paintings from stories he heard from his parents and grandparents about the Great Migration. Here's one of his paintings here showing people waiting at a railroad station to move north, and another painting of a family riding on a train seeing the factories where they hope to live and find work.
Langston Hughes was a famous poet that described what it was like to be an African American in America.
Here's a picture of Langston Hughes, and he was part of the movement called the Harlem Renaissance. Harlem, New York is a place where African Americans lived and felt a certain amount of freedom, and so there was a lot of artistic creativity, and Langston Hughes was part of that. There were also some of the more famous African Americans at the time were in music, and you had a famous singer, a blues singer called Bessie Smith. And here's a picture of her here. Jazz was a very popular music in the 1920s, and some of the leading innovators of the time were two musicians called Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong. And here's Duke Ellington, a jazz composer, so he wrote music. And Louis Armstrong was famous for his trumpet cornet playing and also later for his singing, scat singing specifically.